Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Adam Briggle, and I'm excited about our semester in modern philosophy. I hope you're ready for a bunch of deep thinking about questions and problems that are both perennial and pressing, timely and timeless. In this lecture, I'm just going to kind of introduce us to the course. This is going to be more of the logos and not the logistics. I'm hoping that by the time you see this, maybe we've already had our first Zoom meeting, and I'm going to kind of run through the logistics of the syllabus there. So this is going to be a little bit more about the intellectual content and context of the class. Um, if I can make the slides work, here we go. Okay, so try not to make this too long. What I want to do is just first start with why this class matters, why I think modern philosophy, even though this is my first time teaching it, why I think it's one of the most important classes that we offer. And then I want to give you a broad sketch of modern philosophy from my own somewhat idiosyncratic point of view. Um, I'll do it kind of also include a case study there, and then we'll talk about philosophy, different ways to carve up philosophy, what the typical modern philosophy syllabus looks like, and I've kind of adhered to that pretty closely, although I have to make selections like everybody does, so I'll talk about those at the end. Um, as of now, it looks like we've got about 45 students in this class. 27 of you are philosophy majors. That means about what, 18 or so are not philosophy majors. So I'm trying to speak to both of those groups of people. And I know that for the majors, this is really your chance to pick up some key thinkers as you're piecing together your own view of the history of philosophy. And so I want to acknowledge and honor that. And then for the non-majors, I also want to explain where we are and why we're there in this class. Okay, why is this important? Look at this graph. Population. Something happened, right? You know, humans have been on the planet for 200,000 years, roughly. I think this is only showing us what the last 10,000, 12,000 years or something. What happened in the last, 400 years, 500 years to make population shoot up like this? I think modern philosophy holds some of the answers to that question. And given that this is our condition now, we're approaching 8 billion people on the planet, studying modern philosophy is a way to understand where we are and how we got here. And I think it's super important. Let me give you some more graphs. We are in the age that some people call the Anthropocene or the Great Acceleration. Look at the shape of all these graphs. You don't have to look at them in detail. Notice they're all going up. They're going up recently and rapidly. So population, GDP, energy use, fertilizer consumption, water use, those are all sort of socioeconomic trends on the left, Earth system trends on the right. Methane and carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide in the atmosphere, tropical forest loss, domesticated land. 70% of the Earth's land surface is put to human uses of one sort or the other. And again, I think these trends have their origins in modern European thinking that then led to colonialism and the post-colonial development project and all of this. So I think we're going to be at the roots of our current world in this course. One more I think I've got for you. Look at this. Rapid adoption of new innovations and new technologies. This seems, I think, to us normal, just the way it is. But this is not the way it's been for most cultures, for most peoples during the history of humanity on planet Earth. To live in a worldview, in a world characterized by rapid, accelerating change, innovation, this sort of assumption of linear progress over time. This is modernity. And we're talking with modern philosophy about how that came to be and what that means. Okay. So, in other words, why modern philosophy? We live in the modern age. And modernity is an ongoing condition, including the struggles against it and attempts to theorize it and understand it. So we're going to be primarily examining its historical origins. This will be a historically oriented course. So the people, some of the people, a very select few of the people, right, who helped to give birth and to articulate this world that we're living in. So what is this? What does modernity mean? What are the assumptions and the axioms underneath this growing acceleration that characterizes our time, our moment in time? And then for you interested in the history of philosophy, whether majors or not, I think it's super important to understand some of the modern philosophers, because so much that happens later in philosophy is a reaction to, Descartes and Bacon and Locke and the people that we'll be talking about. Heidegger struggling maybe against modernity, Nietzsche maybe taking it to its ultimate limits, the analytic philosophers in the Anglo-American tradition trying to refine some of the beginning methodological thought that happens with modern philosophy. People trying to go past modernity into post-modernity with Foucault, Derrida, theorizing modernity. Hannah Arendt, one of my favorite philosophers, her book, The Human Condition. We're not going to read it, but I recommend it. And I think you'll understand it better after looking at what we are going to look at in this course. And then, of course, attempts to work out the kinks of modernity, my characterization of Habermas, or to synthesize it in some grand way, Hegel or Marx. Capitalism, right, has its origins in modernity and modern thinking. And then, like we said, we live in the Anthropocene, the age of humans, or the Great Acceleration, as we work out the logic of infinity that I think is at the heart of modern philosophy. And it raises these ultimate questions. What happens next? Are we going to crash? Can we not sustain a high energy, high tech civilization? Are we going to end up going beyond Earth? Are we going to have artificial intelligences that take over humanity, or that join the Republic of Humanity, so that it's not just Homo sapiens who count as humans? I don't know, right? But we're going somewhere, and we're going there fast. And I think the people we're going to study laid the groundwork for that. Here's our little case study. Jeff Bezos, richest guy on the planet, I think. Amazon. So, you might know him through that streaming entertainment platform, that internet shopping platform that brings us so much convenience, door-to-door delivery. But he says his most important project is not convenience, which, by the way, I think is a very modern notion of the good life, which we will see in Locke. He says it's not that that's most important. Rather, it's Blue Origin. What is Blue Origin? Well, it's his own aerospace manufacturing company that's building rockets to do what? Well, to colonize space and to mine and extract resources from planets, planetoids, asteroids. He says eventually, I don't know when, we're going to zone Earth residential only. In other words, we can do all of our energy extraction and heavy industrial work on other planets. Earth in all its beauty, he says, is just our starting point. That's Blue Origin, right? That, I think, is the modern project sort of encapsulated. By the way, look at Bezos. He has self-consciously styled his look to be like Captain Jean-Luc Picard, right, from Star Trek. Or, if you want to put modern philosophy in a nutshell, can't do better than Buzz Lightyear's signature phrase, to infinity and beyond. All right, so that's a little bit why I think it's important. We're going to be studying, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, but it is alive today, right? And we'll try to make those connections throughout the semester. What is philosophy? The love of wisdom, right? The way I tell it is that it begins when we start wondering. And it particularly, I think there's something really right about the usual story that philosophy, at least Western philosophy, begins with the Greeks. When they start to wonder and they start to question authority and tradition, the traditional authoritative answers to why the world is the way it is and how it works. And they start to wonder, they look around at different cultures all around them, different political organizations, and they say, are some better than others? And how could we determine that, right? So the seek for this quest for standards outside of any culture by which to judge cultures, I think, is a big part of the origins of philosophy. Now, what has philosophy become? Okay, modern philosophy, think about John Locke, for example. Locke was not sitting in a university working in an academic department. He was, like many of the earlier philosophers, early modern and before, doing his own crazy thing. Right? In Locke's case, he was working as a physician, as well as a kind of agent of the new colonial order in North America, helping to write up new laws for the colonies, doing all sorts of stuff. Nowadays, though, you think of philosophy, you think of, oh, it's another academic discipline. It's the one that's maybe been left over. It's the rump after all of the specialization has happened in the university. And by the way, that specialization is driven by Descartes and others' effort to get a method honed in that gives birth eventually to the modern sciences, natural and social sciences, and their specialization. So here we are, modern philosophy giving birth to the sciences, right, and specialization. And what remains of philosophy now is a kind of this rump. And philosophy now is kind of understood on the model of the sciences, that as an academic discipline where you get experts talking to other experts, producing a whole bunch of knowledge. I think that's a problem. I'm kind of with Heidegger on this. We ought to think about philosophy as more than just a discipline. I'm fine with that. But let's think about philosophy as a way of life. And let's think about Denken, which is to say thinking. Let's have the integrity to follow thinking where it leads us, to wonder, right? To recapture these sort of origins of philosophy outside of the trappings of an expert discourse, right? Let's just wonder together. I've written up something about this several years ago now in the New York Times. You can look this up, When Philosophy Lost Its Way. Kind of my story, along with a former colleague of mine, about this, what happened with philosophy in the 19th century. Okay, now, you can carve up philosophy in different ways. Analytically is one way to do it. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's certainly long enough to make your eyes glaze over. And this is pretty traditional, right? You got aesthetics, you got applied philosophy. Within applied philosophy, there's lots of different things. Epistemology, ethics, hermeneutics, logic, metaphysics, philosophy of mind, the philosophy of category could go on and on, social and political philosophy, right? So that's one way to carve up philosophy. You can also carve up philosophy by region. African philosophy, American philosophy. We offer some courses here at UNT in pragmatism, for example. Chinese. There's this continental analytic divide, which has this regional connotation, right? Continental being the continent of Europe, analytic being this Anglo or Anglo-American approach to philosophy. You have just European philosophy, Latin American philosophy, which is something our department is starting to branch into. I'm excited about that. I know very little about it, but you can start taking courses in that. Or you can just say there's Western versus non-Western kinds of philosophy. Again, not an exhaustive list, but that's another way to carve up philosophy. But not what we're doing. Here's what we're doing in this course. Historically, this is it's a historical way of dividing up philosophy when you talk about modern philosophy. Okay, so we are going to be thinking in historical terms. Here's one typical way to divide up philosophy historically: ancient, medieval, modern, 19th century, contemporary. Not everybody does it this way. In our department at the graduate level, for example, we have traditionally worked with three categories: ancient, modern, and contemporary. Other people do it different ways, but this is fairly standard. Modern meaning comes from the root modo, which means new or just now, right? The moderns were looking for a new start, a fresh start. They wanted to scrap all the stuff the ancients had been doing, what the medieval scholars like Aquinas had been trying to cram Aristotle into their Christian, worldview. Along comes Machiavelli, Bacon, Descartes, and they say, look, all this is crap. Let's start over. And so there's this sharp contrast with the pre-moderns, sometimes called the quarrel between the ancients and the moderns. And then, of course, modern makes you think about postmodern, post-truth. What comes after modernity? Are we actually in postmodern age? This is stuff for us to think about. Right? Now, you're going to find out, if you don't already know, that part of your grade is to watch me give some lectures on a topic that I think is fascinating and important: geoengineering. And the way I'm going to do this is by mixing and matching. So you have that analytic way of chopping up philosophy, and you have the historical way of chopping up philosophy. You can stick them together. And so I'm going to be looking at geoengineering this semester with you. as a topic in modern social and political philosophy. And so we're going to have a chance to learn about this, and I'm going to try to do it in a way where I relate specifically the things we're learning in class to this cutting edge social and political question of our age. Part of what I'm doing also with this is a way to try to blend my own research interests with my teaching so that the teaching and the research can mutually reinforce and enrich one another. And I see that as part of the mission of a research university like UNT. So more on that in these other lectures, and we can talk more about that in our Zooms. I put this in here not to dwell on it, but you may be interested. There's another way to chop up philosophy, right? Which is this very real political economic way of the taxonomy of a university. And so at UNT, you might be interested to know the way academic departments, including philosophy, again, philosophy is pictured in a very modern way as another specialization in a knowledge production enterprise, which is the modern university. And it's called a modern university for a reason, because it's about the growth of knowledge and the celebration of knowledge as a good in its own right. These are things we're going to talk about this semester. You have basically two different kinds of teachers, or let's say knowledge workers or knowledge laborers in the university. There's the tenure track, which means you're afforded, once you get tenure, at the level of associate professor, which is where I am now. So assistant professors are on their way to try to earn tenure. And then you have kind of these mid-level dudes like me who are associates, and then you can go up a step to full professor. These have salary connotations, and you can look up UNT salaries, that's public information. But more importantly, intellectually, is that tenure affords you certain protections for academic freedom of speech, right? And I think the idea is that people like me have an obligation as public servants to the state of Texas to help speak truth to power. And that's the way we serve the common good. Now, on the other side, you have non-tenure track folks who I think are also engaged in the core mission of the university to educate the next generation. But there's this real sort of socioeconomic divide here, which I think is problematic, especially when you talk about the adjunctification of the university. See this category of adjuncts? You look up data, more and more, astoundingly more, like 74% now, and if you go back 50 years, it was only 25% of teachers in the university were adjuncts. And why is that a problem? Not because adjuncts are less skilled. In fact, they're usually the best teachers, right? They're usually the hardest workers. They usually care the most about students, but they get treated like crap, usually. No benefits. This is like the Uberization of the workforce here, right? So contingent, no security sort of work. You have lecturers who are not on the tenure track, but do have more of a contractual security built in to what they're doing. And then you have grad students who do actually, in our department, the bulk of our teaching. You have teaching assistants, which are working with a faculty member, and teaching fellows, TFs, who are on their own. This is stuff we can talk about if you're interested. I rarely lay it out for students, but when I do, I find that they're quite interested in knowing who's who at the university and what are the political dynamics involved. And I think that's appropriate because I think these are philosophical questions that we should examine. It's almost like a meta-philosophy, a philosophy of philosophy. Okay, but enough of that. Here is a typical modern philosophy syllabus, and maybe you should call it modern Western or European philosophy. I think that's something we should talk about if you want to. Should we explicitly label this as a geographically focused course? Because it is. In what ways does that matter or not? I'm interested in those debates. The people in bold are the most common. I won't go through this whole list. You can see, if you go through our syllabus, yes, I have Descartes. I don't have Hobbes, but I do have Bacon, okay, for us. John Locke, although what I chose from Locke is maybe a little bit different than what most people choose. Oh my goodness, we don't have Leibniz or Berkeley or Hume or Rousseau. Yikes. We do have Kant, but I'm adding Mary Wollstonecraft, okay? So this is just to say, look, we can't do it all. All of these people are super important. I hope over your lives you have a chance to immerse yourself in their thoughts. Um, but we got one semester, right? So let's do what we can do. Last thing, there is a trade-off here, in other words, right? We can't do it all. Imagine just reading Kant, just reading Kant. I mean, Kant's collected corpus of works simply would be impossible to cover in a semester. People spend their entire lives poring over that, right? And if we were to try to do it, we wouldn't get much of it done, and then we wouldn't have any other perspectives involved in the course, right? Or imagine doing a new thinker every day in the class. That would be nice. We sure would get a lot of different perspectives, but we wouldn't have a chance to slow down and find the time to think along with them in something of a sustained manner. So what I've tried to do is select just enough to give us some variety, but not too much to drive us crazy. And so we never have a sort of thread of thought that we can follow through. Um, I have some fidelity to these core great thinkers. I think everybody on that list I just showed you is a great thinker and is somebody worthy of our attention, right? Not of our slavish obedience or agreement, but our careful attention. Descartes and Locke, for example, I think are just foundational thinkers. And this is, again, recognition that for the film majors in the class, I know that you're picking up different people in different courses, and these are some of the key people, and this is your chance to study those key people, right? So I want to honor that. I told you I chose Locke's second treatise instead of some of his epistemological work, which people tend to use. Well, why? I'm just more interested in that. I mean, frankly, and I think it's at least equally as important, right? And again, we can't do it all. And then lastly, I have this urge to kind of expand the core or the canon to represent other views, even just modestly. Mary Wollstonecraft, I think, should be one of those bolded names. It should be more commonly included. I'll see what you think, when you read some of her writings. I wanted to just note here, and I think I'll end it here. She's the mother of Mary Shelley, who, fantastic, brilliant thinker, the author of Frankenstein. Frankenstein, I think, is a wonderful kind of concentrated essence of modernity and the questions and problems that it poses. Mary Shelley was reading the Republic of Letters. This is around 1818, and absorbing all of this new philosophy, new sciences that were coming out. And the story of Frankenstein, in another way, is a good encapsulation of modern philosophy. We won't read it, but I think it's fun to keep that in the back of your mind, and maybe we can raise it up every once in a while. Okay, enough of me yammering on. I'll see you all in class. And until then, may the force be with you.